everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is the O3 webinar series, What's New in O3? And today's topic is how O3 is changing the game with its suite of solutions. Now, if you've attended any of our previous webinars, you might be accustomed to us diving specifically into a use case or a success story that we've had with one of our clients, or even a very specific area of our solution. But what we wanted to do today was dial back out and give you an update on all of the areas of our solution that we have updated or added functionality and capabilities to, and give everyone a high-level overview of the solution suite as a whole. So before we get started, we wanted to take a moment to have a short safety moment. So if you are attending with us live, we are right here before the Thanksgiving holiday in the US, and that generally means traveling. That looks a little different this year. We are in the middle of a pandemic, so we're adjusting life a bit, and there's some tips out there of ways that you can keep your friends and family together during Thanksgiving, but stay safe at the same time. So some things to keep in mind when you're doing your event planning. If you're in an area that has more temperate weather, you could look at doing outdoor activities rather than indoor activities. Stay along the lines of wearing your mask and using hand sanitizer and social distancing when you can. Strictly avoid contact with people that are outside of your household for 14 days before the gathering. So again, if you're in the US, right about now is where you really want to start being safe and reducing any exposure that you may have, and limit the guests to just your local area. So that's sad, I know, because most of us like to travel and see those family members that maybe we don't get to see as often. But that's just not a safe thing to do right now. So you might want to include a virtual dinner option and join via FaceTime or Zoom or something like that to keep people involved. On the food prep side, stay with your normal hygiene practices of soap and water, washing your hands for at least 20 seconds. But some things to consider now are maybe instead of a potluck, encourage everyone to bring your own drinks and food and make that fun. Limit the people that are in a food prep area. If your family's like mine, we generally congregate in the kitchen. Try not to do that this year. The people that are preparing anything that might be shared, wear a mask, and consider using single-use options for things like utensils and plates, just to, again, cut down on the possibility of spread. And you'll see over here to the left, the CDC official guidelines are saying that attending large indoor gatherings with people outside your household is among a high-risk activity, and warns and recommends not to do that. So we hope that you take these into consideration as you're getting ready to celebrate this holiday season. So with that, I will introduce our speaker for today. Might be a familiar face for some of you. This is our CEO, Josh Girvin, and he is also a subcommittee co-chair for the Construction Industry Institute AWP Community for Business Advancement. So that's a mouthful, but within the group there at CII, he is in charge of the Performance and Benchmarking Subcommittee. So doing some great work on understanding AWP ROI and things of that nature. He's also a part of the CII Technology Committee. In his previous life, he was an SVP of Product and Marketing Strategy for a materials management company, and he is the proud owner of 12 technology patents and a BSc in mechanical engineering. So glad to have you with us today, Josh. And if you're there, I will now turn the presentation over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mandy. I appreciate that. So as we're getting started today, I'd like to first talk a little bit about the purpose of today's presentation. One thing that we've realized is that there are a lot of different ideas out there about what O3 provides to the market. Some people see O3 as the inventor of constraint management in industrial construction. Some people see it as a WorkFace planning tool, others as a Kanban collaboration environment or an AWP oversight tool for owners. There's all these different ways that people get value out of O3 and ways that people think about O3. And so the intent for today is to provide a more holistic view of what O3 does in the market and explain how those solutions are broken down into different solution sets as part of our overall solution suite. One thing to keep in mind as we go through this, this is an evergreen solution suite, so we are constantly adding to our functionality. We are an agile development shop, so we do a production release every 2 weeks. So that means we have 26 production releases every year. So we're constantly driving innovation within our product. And as a result, we're going to provide this type of solution suite overview or update at least annually. So you'll have an opportunity to see this at least annually and possibly more frequently as well. So now that we understand why we're here and the intent for today, start off with just a little bit of who is O3. O3 is a modern SaaS platform that is purpose-built around advanced work packaging and agile best practices for the industrial construction industry. So a couple of things to keep in mind there. One, it is modern and SaaS. We are purpose-built around AWP and Agile, so it's not a generic solution. It is a platform. That platform was developed intentionally to cover the entire life cycle of a project from concept through commissioning, and it was built as a platform from the beginning, leveraging one single architecture, one single data structure, one single consistent user interface. So it's not a situation where we've purchased a bunch of companies and smashed them together to try to make a platform solution. And it is purpose-built for the industrial construction industry. A little bit about who we serve. Our client base is roughly 50-50 split between owners and EPCs. We're on some of the world's largest projects with TICs in the 40, 50, or $60 billion range, as well as small cap projects where the TIC is as small as $50,000 or less than $100,000, and then everything in between. So lots of experience on big projects, lots of experience on managing programs of small projects, and everything in between those. From an overall solution suite perspective, this is what the solution suite looks like. As I mentioned, it is a platform that goes across the entire life cycle of the project. And we'll go into more detail as we go through what each of these solutions means. But I think the takeaway here is that it is a comprehensive overall solution suite that covers that entire project life cycle. And it is a platform that was intentionally built from the beginning to be a single consistent user interface and architecture to cover that entire project life cycle. When we look at other solutions in this space, we put those into really 3 buckets. Those 3 buckets are legacy providers. So this would be folks that released WorkFace Planning tools maybe 15 or 20 years ago. They're thick clients. They're not SaaS solutions. They're on-premise. They have a 1990s style desktop kind of application and user interface. The second bucket would be the unopinionated software provider. So this is the everything to everyone solution. So they're more of a generic software tool. They're not purpose-built for AWP or purpose-built for any particular methodology. It's more of a everything to everyone and master of none. And then there have been a few startups that have emerged. I've seen some of the success of O3. There are some startups that have emerged and are coming into this space. And we kind of put the other folks into these 3 buckets, and we see ourselves as being very different than all 3 of those. In terms of the first bucket, we're not burdened by this legacy tech debt. We have a modern architecture. We're SaaS from the very beginning, mobile from the very beginning, a modern user interface. So we're not having to kind of carry the dead weight of this old technology and old design and old architecture. And then in terms of being an opinionated software, we believe AWP and Agile are the correct ways to drive a industrial construction project. If it turns out that there's a better solution, well, we've bet on this solution. We believe it's correct. If you believe in AWP and you believe in Agile, we agree with you, and we're very opinionated about that. And you see that in our software. We have over 10 work package types out of the box inside of O3. So it's not something where we dabble a little bit into AWP. It's core to our framework and the structure of our data. We have more work package types than any other tool that we're aware of. The best practices are built directly into the tool, and we also support the Sprint and Scrum methodologies from an Agile perspective. And then lastly, this isn't a new thing. We are battle tested. We have over 10,000 users in the tool, over 200 projects. We've got a net promoter score of 58, which for those of you who aren't familiar with that, that's a measure of how likely people are to recommend your tool to someone else. A really good score in our industry is 30, so we were almost double that. So we've got a really loyal, large customer base of people who really enjoy using our tool. And part of that has a result of the fact that we are so agile in our development. We're constantly releasing new functionality, and a lot of that functionality is driven from direct feedback from our end users. So we're really responsive to the feedback that we get from the field, and we rapidly incorporate that into the tool. And that's why we enjoy such a positive rating amongst our users and clients. So with all that said, I'm going to jump in and go through some of the solution suites. So we showed this image before. First, I'm going to start out at the base of the platform with something that we call OnCourse. OnCourse is critical to the change management process. So anytime that you're introducing a new process or technology, the biggest challenge to maximizing the benefit of that is driving change management and getting real healthy adoption of that new process or technology. And so we developed OnCourse to help us drive both advanced work packaging and WorkFace planning and Agile process changes with our clients, but then also to drive the adoption of O3 itself. So why is this needed? You think, we have learning management systems, why would we need this other tool? The answer to that is that we found that while our clients have learning management systems, when you get to a project, you've got all these different stakeholders. You've got a joint venture, you've got an EPC, you've got an owner, you've got 50 different contractors, and they don't have access to one learning management system because you have to be within the domain of any one company to have access to that. And so what we found was people were managing this change management process in Excel, and that really breaks down and has real limited ability to drive the change that you need. And so we developed this functionality to support driving this change, tracking the training, having learning paths, and just driving the adoption of the new process and technology. Initially, we were focused on AWP adoption and O3 adoption. Now we have clients that are using this to drive adoption of other people's tools because it's so effective, as well as other training like orientation and safety, things of that nature. In terms of the components found inside of this solution set, it's training management, learning management, which is learning paths, putting people down a path to drive towards a certain goal, like a certificate. We have certificate management, and then obviously all the training metrics, reports, and analytics that go with that. Some of the benefits that we see is really a reduction in the time required to manage this process, particularly in the way that it allows for the delegation of the activity. So you can actually push out the signing up for courses out to individuals. They can go in and self-sign up for courses. They can see what courses they need to sign up for. And then you can also delegate down to additional training admins at contractors, for example, so they can manage the training of their own resources. So it's a good way to kind of move some of that burden off of the central main training admin and push it out to individuals and other training admins within the other organizations. And what makes O3 different here? Well, it's that modern collaborative SaaS platform where you can get all these people together and they can engage in this process of signing up and managing their training on their own. So it's that pushing that out and decentralizing that effort and giving it out to others that makes O3 really unique in its approach here. So the second solution we're going to talk about today is OnTarget. So OnTarget builds on that change management that we've gotten from OnCourse, and it allows us to start introducing the digitalization of your project scope, schedule, budget, risks, and other project management components. So again, what we found was that on projects, people are using a lot of really manual processes, whether it's Excel or PDF reports. So if they're tracking things like mechanical equipment or MDRs or this, the requisition process, there's all this data tracking that's really important. And that exchange between different organizations is happening in this really inefficient manner, using spreadsheets or PDFs or these Excel logs. And there's a lot of issues associated with that. One is it's really inefficient. There's a lot of creating a report and then someone else spending time to try to read that report and understand the context that that's been presented in, as opposed to doing a data-centric exchange. So what O3 did is we eliminated that PDF exchange and that Excel exchange, and we now digitize all that inside the tool where people can manage that as a true entity within the application. They can assign things, they can manage that work in a proper fashion, as opposed to chasing down spreadsheets and PDF reports outside of the tool. Inside of the OnTarget solution, we have a number of components: project management, risk management, schedule management, team goal management, and agile task management. The first three I think people are pretty familiar with. Team goal management is a little unique. This is where you can create goals for the project or for specific teams. You can have an action plan for achieving those goals, and you can track your progress towards those goals. It's part of our continuous improvement initiative that O3 helps you to drive. And then agile task management is really critical here. One of the most important tenets of agile project management is this idea that you want to make all work visible. And O3 does that, whether that's a project management action or a risk action or a mitigation step or a schedule related task or a general meeting action item. It doesn't matter. We eliminate all of those spreadsheets and emails that historically have been used on projects to try to manage those tasks. And we bring them all into one place where everyone has visibility into those tasks. They can be assigned to people. They can have due dates. They've got alerts and notifications and reports and tracking. So it gives you this ability to see all that work and really drive it through to completion, unlike a manual effort using something like an Excel action log, which we often see on projects. So what's the benefit of this? The benefit of this is that, one, it allows you to have this collaborative action management where you can push that out and everyone has this visibility. That visibility drives the accountability, that positive accountability of understanding who's responsible for what. It has this clarity. You remove all of the inefficiency associated with, well, what email was that in, or who's got that Excel log, or what am I supposed to be doing? All of that is very easy to understand across all the project stakeholders, not limited to just one organization or one team, but the entire project across the owner and EPC and all the contractors. Now you have this shared, collaborative, highly visible, positive accountability environment that leads to significant increases in efficiency. So we've talked about the process of driving change management with OnCourse, and then digitizing and introducing this more efficient task management through agile task management with OnTarget. So we've gotten to AWP, we've changed and brought in that new process. We've digitized our processes with OnTarget, and now we're getting into this next layer here, which starts to be really specific to the advanced work packaging, and it's broken down by phase of the project. So the first phase that we're looking at is OnPlan. That OnPlan is for front-end planning. So this is typically the owner who's using this solution set, and this is all about setting up your AWP implementation for success by beginning with the end in mind. So why would you need to do that? And the real reason for that is because if you're doing true advanced work packaging, that begins in the concept phase of the project very early on. AWP is not a construction execution methodology. AWP is a project execution methodology. So if you want to maximize the value of AWP, one, you have to start early, but two, you have to clearly define what that means. What level of AWP are you doing on your project? What best practices are you going to be using for your project? How are you going to measure whether or not those best practices are being followed and AWP is truly being adopted? How are you going to measure whether or not you're seeing the benefits of AWP? And trying to do that in homegrown one-off solutions is really challenging, or trying to use Excel to address that is really challenging. Having purpose-built software designed for that program management is really, really valuable. Inside of the OnPlan solution, there's a number of components: AWP Master Index, path of construction development, AWP best practices, labor management, AWP health and adoption metrics, and interactive planning session management. So these are the core functions that are critical early on in the project. I will point to a couple of those. One is the AWP Master Index. So some projects try to manage this in Excel. This can be a real disaster on a complicated project. You want to have a purpose-built solution. So AWP Master Index is a term that O3 coined around this idea that you want to have all of your package framework in one place. You want to understand all the association between those different types of packages, and you need a place to maintain that because it is dynamic. Early on in the project, you create that framework, but you need a way to update that throughout the life of the project. And then all the other systems that rely on that, like your scheduling tool or your materials management tool, all these other tools that rely on that framework, they need to be updated from this one master tool. And that's what O3 does through this master index functionality. We talked about defining the best practices, and then the health and adoption metrics to measure whether or not those are happening. Also critical to driving successful AWP. If you're not defining what you want to see and measuring whether or not you're seeing it, it's unlikely that you'll get the results that you want. So the benefits of this, if you start early, you clearly define what AWP means for the project. You measure whether or not you're achieving that. You measure whether or not you're getting the outcomes throughout the project. That gives you the best chance of reaching that positive outcomes of the schedule adherence and the budget and the safety and the cost avoidance, all those things that you set out to do. You increase the likelihood that you achieve those by putting a tool like this in place to help you track that. And what makes O3 different? Well, it's the only tool really that's built to do this, right? There are some Excel solutions out there trying to do some things here or there, but this O3 is really the only tool that's purpose-built around this idea of defining your AWP best practices and measuring whether or not those are occurring, and having the tools to facilitate some of those best practices like the path of construction development and the AWP master index. So now that we've set up our project for success, now we're moving out of the front-end planning side and we're going into detailed design. So during detailed design, we want to be leveraging AWP best practices, and we're going to do that using our OnDesign solution. An OnDesign solution within O3 is purpose-built for engineering and procurement. And why did we develop this solution? We developed this solution because standard approaches to AWP do not directly add value to engineering and procurement. Now, I understand that's a little bit of a controversial statement, but let me explain that. Advanced work packaging is designed around the idea that we want to make construction very efficient. Engineering wants to do construction-driven engineering so that the constraints can be removed and construction can be constraint-free and be very efficient in the field. And that's really important. That drives a huge amount of value. 25% increase in field productivity is massive for projects, but we haven't seen a massive adoption of AWP within engineering. And I would say that I've never seen an engineering organization say, I want to do AWP, even if you're not going to use that data downstream, even if you're not going to do workface planning and construction, I'm going to do AWP because it's so beneficial to me and my engineering team. And that's the challenge. That's why we don't see the level of adoption in engineering that we should see. And that's where O3 has partnered with some major EP firms to develop AWP functionality that benefits engineering and procurement directly, so that those organizations are ecstatic to use AWP in engineering, even if it's not going to be used downstream in construction, because they're getting benefit directly. So that's a critical piece to this. And in order to do that, we had to invent some new work package types, which we've added to our tool. We've addressed the engineering work package and procurement work package process, but we've also added things like vendor work packages and design work packages to better support engineering directly. We're leveraging the status visualization in the 3D, 4D model to understand the progress. Obviously, our constraint management, O3, being the kind of inventor of constraint management inside of the industrial construction space, that constraint management engine applies within these other package types like engineering packages and procurement packages and design packages and vendor work packages. And then obviously, we have all of our reporting and analytics so that you can see your progress through that process. So what do you get out of this? Well, it's a reduction in engineering hours. It's making procurement and engineering more effective and more efficient directly. So it's all about making value directly to engineering and procurement organizations. And then obviously the downstream benefits are still there. Construction is still supported. The path of engineering and path of procurement still support the path of construction. You get a significant reduction in the inefficiency associated with managing vendor documentation, which we all know is a real challenge. And so why is O3's approach different here? Well, one, we've invented some new work package types around vendor work package and design work package. We've introduced this ability to manage all of these tasks and actions within an Agile sprint framework, so I can collect the tasks for a team and manage them inside of a sprint. And then it's also a collaborative environment, which is particularly important when we're talking about the vendor data exchange. So this process of back and forth with the vendors and commenting and redlining and capturing constraints, all of that now you can do in a collaborative environment where actually the vendors and the engineers can be inside the same tool and communicating back and forth directly, removing a lot of inefficiency associated with that back and forth process. So it's a collaborative data-centric environment as opposed to a uncollaborative document-centric approach to exchanging that information. So once we've gotten through detailed design, the next phase of the project is construction execution, and that's where we get to the OnBuild functionality within O3. So OnBuild is really modern workface planning. So workface planning has been around for a while. There are tools that provide workface planning. This is the modern version of that. So this is the SaaS environment. So it does both graphical and non-graphical inside the same tool. So all your disciplines, all packages are created inside one tool. Previously we've seen on projects where maybe I have a graphical tool for creating my pipe and steel packages, and then I'm going to Word or Excel for these other disciplines, and then I'm going to another tool in Excel to try to manage constraints, and another tool in Excel to have an approval log. So it's just a disconnected system across all these disparate tools. O3 has brought all that together in one solution where now in my SaaS environment, I can manage my graphical packages, I can manage my non-graphically scoped packages, I can manage my workflows, my statuses, my approvals, my constraints, my delays, my progress. All of that is done inside of one single tool. So all that information is together and managed in a more efficient, automated, and modern way. Inside of that, from a component perspective, obviously workface planning, which includes both that graphical 3D model-based package scoping process, as well as the non-graphical, leveraging engineering lists and such to build those packages. Construction management for your construction work packages, the 3D 4D status visualization, constraint management. Obviously, O3 is synonymous with constraint management. Super powerful constraint management engine inside the tool applies to all these package types. Reporting and analytics, and then scaffold management. So O3's actually created a scaffold work package type and can manage the scaffold and scaffold request process. That scaffold work package is particularly interesting when you start to do cross-discipline scaffold planning, so you can get some real efficiency gains by moving scaffolding to its own package as opposed to just being a constraint on an individual package. Then you can start to think about using that scaffold across multiple IWPs and be more efficient with that scaffold. So there's a lot of benefit associated with using workface planning for your scaffolding in addition to your standard construction. So what are the benefits associated with this? First of all, you've got a single environment where you have visibility across all these in one place. You have a significant increase in efficiency. You're leveraging AWP benefits across all disciplines, regardless of whether the engineering model supports the has a sufficient attribution to support leveraging that graphical scoping capabilities. You've got true work package management. So the scoping of a package is just the beginning. The fact that I've said, hey, all these items should be in a package and be done together, that's just the beginning. Once you've scoped that package, now you have to move that through a workflow and status that package. You've got to identify and manage and assign and clear constraints. You've got to have approvals and sign-offs through that process. You have to execute it in the field and capture progress. You have to close it out and do a retrospective and understand how you could have improved that process. If you really are doing advanced work packaging correctly, the scoping piece is just the very beginning. The value comes from managing it all the way through the process, and that's what O3 does better than any other application out there on the market. So O3 is able to do that because it is a modern approach. It's using the SaaS and it's I think the other kind of piece to this, through our partnership with Autodesk, we are able to support engineering models from any authoring tool and support any size of model, both large and small. And then also, just as a modern SaaS tool, we can do multiple projects. So we can manage programs in one single implementation of the tool. We can provide access so contractors can go in and create their own packages, or you can assign constraints out regardless of the organization they belong to. Some constraints belong to the owner. Maybe you need permit sign off. Some constraints belong to the subcontractor. You can manage all those in a single environment where you can have visibility across all of those various pieces. So now that we've gotten through construction execution, we're moving into commissioning and startup phase of the project. And so the solution set there is called OnStart. OnStart is really about that seamless transition from execution into operations. There's a lot of challenges in here, a lot of challenges around identifying what work needs to be prioritized to get through this commissioning process, managing punch lists, working off of lagging data, inefficient information. There are a lot of challenges associated with an efficient transition from execution into operations, and O3 addresses a lot of these challenges. And we do that through a set of components. Those include test management, turnover management, systems completion, punch list management, startup management, and reporting and analytics. So one of the challenges that we find is that people, as they move out of this execution process, again, you start falling off of using these purpose-built tools and you start getting into the world of introducing Excel or Word, or these various very document-centric approaches to trying to manage this information. By using a data-centric approach, we can understand what work needs to be prioritized where in order to be the most efficient process throughout your completions and commissioning process. We can drive this go-ahead work where necessary to get to through testing and get through that system's completion process. So there's a lot of benefit to being able to visualize this information inside the tool and drive people through to closing out the correct sequence and correct priority to make this as efficient as possible. So the benefits that come out of this, it's the prioritization of this work and effort, understanding how various pieces go together and how they interact with each other. If you're inside of Excel or an unstructured environment, if you're not leveraging a database tool here, it's very difficult to prioritize. You're relying on a human to understand what are the pieces that I should be doing in which order to be the most efficient to get this work done. And with a tool and a database and understanding an ADP master index that understands all those connections between each other, that process now, you've taken that decision-making process away from the human and you're using the tool to make that significantly more efficient. So what makes O3 different here? Well, one, we're introducing our robust constraint management that's available throughout all these package types in this process, which historically that's been a very ad hoc manual process. We're leveraging the graphical visualization of this from a status perspective so you can understand within that geospatial context of what's going on. And then it is, again, that collaborative environment where all of the parties are within one area. So if there's responsibilities of the owner, those are made clear, of the contractor, those are made clear. So it's very easy to manage across the multiple organizations that are involved in this process. So that takes us through the life cycle of the project, thinking about from the very beginning OnPlan with this front-end planning side to OnDesign with the detailed design into OnBuild for the construction execution to OnStart for completions and startup. So now we've gone across that entire life cycle of the project. Now we're going to extend out into the field and talk about the mobile experience within O3. The first part of that mobile experience that we're going to talk about is our on-field application. OnField is a native iPad application, and it's about digitizing WorkFace planning in the field. So this is about eliminating that last mile problem of the paper. So we've built out our packages, we've got our drawing information, we've got all our constraints, we understand all this, but we're pushing that out into the field in a PDF or a Word document, and that introduces a manual paper-based process that's error-prone, that requires double data entry. It's just very inefficient. It introduces challenges to the process and inefficiency. So what does this solution provide? Well, it's field IWP access, field drawing access, constraint management, and progress measurement. So this is really designed around what the foreman needs to be able to remove the typical PDF printout of that IWP. So now I can access that data in the field. I don't need that printout. I can access those drawings in the field. I don't need that printout. I can manage and update constraint information or create a new constraint in the field rather than having to run back or radio back to the trailer. And I can capture that progress information directly in the application using the structured format, getting that information back more easily and more readily back into the system. Obviously, this all connects back into our web application, so all of this feeds into the standard reporting analytics that you guys are familiar with. All this data makes it back into the O3 web application and can be leveraged in that environment as well. So why is this? Why would you do this? Why is this important? Well, it's because there's a lot of inefficiency associated with the paper-based process. It's manual, it's error-prone, it's slower, it's not real time. There's a lot of challenges associated with using that paper. So you can improve the access to information in the field so you can make better decisions in the field. You can improve the accuracy of the data you're collecting because you've now structured that data collection process and it's happening in real time at the workface. And then you can manage those constraints more efficiently in the field. So if something pops up and you see a constraint and you understand that, you can immediately pass that information back, and now that's available to, and that process now others can start working on that constraint and removing that constraint on your behalf. So it shortens some of those cycle times to identifying and solving those problems so you can maintain your efficiency in the field. This is a native iPad app, purpose-built to support the foreman. It's this real-time process. And just like all the rest of O3, it is a modern, intuitive user interface and experience. So it's just that modern approach to software development that we've extended out into the mobile as well. The next mobile application that we'll talk about is our OnTools application. OnTools is a mobile tool time tracking tool for driving field productivity. And so this is all about collecting information on time on tools in the field. Why is that important? It's important because if you don't measure this, it's very difficult to improve it. And a lot of people have processes in place to measure this, but typically it's done with a paper and a clipboard, and someone's going out and jotting down some notes and then coming back and paying someone else to hammer that into a system. That's a real challenge. There's a lot of inefficiency associated with that. And there's a lot of benefit when you can have a good tool time process in place, because you can tie the benefits of that field productivity back to your AWP. So if you've got OnPlan and O3 in place, and you understand the AWP best practices that are being used, and you're measuring the health and adoption of those AWP best practices over the life cycle of the project, and then you're measuring this outcome of the field productivity, now you can make that connection between the health of the AWP program and the outcome of that increase in time on tools or field productivity. And that's really powerful information. And we do that through a couple of components. One is the tool time observations in the field, so you can capture that information in real time, and then also the tool time reporting, so that data comes back to the web application where we have really robust reporting and analytics, and you can do that on individual project as well as cross-project or program level reporting. It is important to note that that information does come back in real time, but we also support offline mode. So for instances where you don't have great network connectivity, you can capture that information in the field, and then when you return to network, that information will then sync at that time. But if you have network, it is real time. So what's the value of this? Well, from a data collection process, it's more efficient, requires less effort to more quickly gather more data that's more accurate. So if you're interested in knowing tool time data, this is faster, better, cheaper way to collect that information. But then why do you want to have this information? You want to have this information because it allows you to understand the ROI associated with your AWP program. This is a great way to measure and understand whether or not you are making a difference through introducing AWP. And in fact, we've had clients who have publicly spoke at AWP conference, for example, where they've talked about the increase in productivity that they've seen as a result of leveraging AWP, and we can directly connect that health of that AWP program to those outcome benefits of productivity in the field. What makes O3 different here? Well, it's an iPad app. It's not a clipboard and a piece of paper. It's a modern, easy to use interface, and it connects directly back into the super powerful O3 platform for that reporting and analytics. The next mobile solution we'll talk about is OnSafe. OnSafe, very similar to OnTools, but as you might imagine, is focused on safety observations as opposed to productivity observations. And this is a way to collect better data on safety observations in the field faster and more accurately collect that information. And why is that important? It's important because there's no room for errors when you're talking about safety. If you want to improve your safety, you've got to be measuring these leading indicators. These observations of unsafe behavior are really critical leading indicators, and it allows you to identify where you may need to focus some of your safety efforts, take that corrective action, and prevent those safety incidents from occurring. So this is all about prevention. It's about identifying trends early so you can take corrective action. You can adjust, maybe have a toolbox talk on a specific safety issue. You can drive a change that will result in a reduction of those safety incidents that we all know we need to avoid. And so what's involved in this from a component perspective? Safety observations, so you can perform those readings in the field, collect that data in real time, send that back for reporting and analytics using the web app. Again, it is a native iPad app. It does support offline mode for instances where you don't have that network connectivity, but otherwise real time passing that data back. And then the most important thing about this, the real value, comes from the fact that you can then analyze that and focus on taking corrective actions. You can drive and change the behavior so that you can ultimately avoid having those safety incidents. So this is about leading indicators around safety observations, collecting that data, being able to see that in a reporting system that allows you to understand and reach some insights that you can then take corrective action and prevent those safety incidents from occurring. What makes O3 different here? Again, not a clipboard and a piece of paper. This is a mobile native iPad app, modern intuitive user experience, real-time connectivity back to the really robust O3 reporting and analytics engine. So just really, this is, when you're going against a paper-based process, there's just no question that this is a faster, easier, cheaper, more accurate way to collect this information. When it comes to safety, really there's just no room for error. So we went through the mobile set of solutions that extend the O3 functionality out into the field in a data collection and access to information function. Now we're going to talk about O3 Enterprise Edition. O3 Enterprise Edition is for those clients that have moved beyond one or two projects, and now they're interested in approaching AWP from a programmatic perspective. So they want to standardize AWP across their facilities, portfolios, or companies. And I think it's important to note here, when we say standardize AWP, we're not saying that every single project is going to be exactly the same. The way O3 is set up is that there are project templates to fit with your project archetype. So you may say AWP within my organization is going to look like this on my small cap projects. It's going to look like this on my large cap lump sum projects, and it's going to look like this on my large cap T&M material projects, and it's going to look like this on my mid cap projects. We allow you to set up multiple project templates and multiple approaches for those different project archetypes. But then once you're talking about within a single project archetype, you want to drive consistency. You want to have that be as consistent of an application of AWP as possible, and you want to have a plan for what that's going to look like. What is my AWP rollout for my enterprise going to look like? If you are expecting to achieve a programmatic approach to AWP and a rollout across your entire enterprise, it's unlikely you'll be successful if you're trying to manage that in just some Excel sheets. This is purpose-built functionality that allows you to have centralized visibility into the health of the overall AWP program. It allows you to map out what that plan looks like from a rollout perspective. And then it allows you to take advantage of some of the core functionality in O3 that applies really more to enterprises. Some of that includes enterprise infrastructure. So that's things like enhanced single sign-on to incorporate with your existing IT infrastructure. It includes things like advanced data management. So this goes beyond the core platform data management functionality to the next level for folks that are really rolling out O3 as a toolkit tool, a standard toolkit tool within their organization. The cross-project reporting functionality. So again, as a modern SaaS application, O3 has this huge advantage of not being an on-premise solution that's limited to just one project. All of the projects for a given implementation are inside of one implementation. So now I can quickly jump between those projects. If I'm at the, if I'm the AWP program manager for this organization, I can jump in and see all the different projects. I can pull up multiple projects and compare against them. I can compare against a business unit or an entire portfolio. I can organize and do this cross-project comparison in whatever way best facilitates what I'm trying to accomplish. And then I can manage this program. I can have a plan for what my rollout looks like. I can understand which projects I'm trying to tackle, what level of AWP I'm expecting to see at those projects, what level of AWP am I actually realizing at those projects, what benefits am I expecting to see, what benefits am I realizing at those projects. So it gives you this ability to truly plan out and manage your programmatic approach to AWP that goes well beyond the, I have an Excel sheet with a list of projects and a red, green, or yellow. Right, that's a start, but that doesn't allow you to really manage this. If AWP is important to your organization, you need a tool that helps you to truly proactively manage and drive that across your organization. So the benefits of this: one, if we don't have cross-project comparison, you can't do meaningful continuous improvement. It's really hard to have that feedback loop to drive that improvement. I talked about this a little bit in the AWP conference a few weeks ago. One of the challenges we have is we treat all these projects as snowflakes, and then it becomes, we say, well, they're all different, so you can't really compare against them, or we raise our comparisons to such a high level, like something like schedule or budget adherence, that we lose the ability to take action. We'll say, well, okay, this project was better than that project, but why? Right? But if we're measuring AWP process and adherence to that process and the health of that process, it doesn't matter what your scope is or what your tech stack is or who the contractor is on these various projects. I can now compare across projects, abstracting away from those project specifics. I can compare across projects. I can compare the health of the process, the AWP adoption, and that now can lead to continuous improvement. particularly when I'm tying in those outcomes like the productivity and safety outcomes that we talked about previously. Now I can do real cross-project comparison. I have a feedback loop to improve over time, so I can have real continuous improvement. This also allows you to leverage your existing IT investments, maximize the value of AWP by driving it as quickly as possible, making the change process go as fast as possible. And then through standardization of your program, you can get a lot of benefits and efficiency. So this is all about transitioning from I did an AWP project or I did an AWP pilot to now I'm serious about AWP. I want to roll this out in a programmatic fashion. And if you're going to do that and you're going to do it well, you're going to need a tool to help you through that. And what makes O3 different? It's the only tool that we know of that's actually designed to do this, right? There's some Excel sheets out there with red, yellow, green on them, but this is a purpose-built software designed to help you do this. And it has all the data from the projects, right? If you're using O3 on your projects for AWP, we've already got all that data on the health of AWP and the project, so that information, the next level of just rolling that up to a program, that makes a lot of sense. If you're trying to do that in an Excel sheet that doesn't actually have any of that data, you're very limited in kind of the insights and the information that you can pull from that. So this is all about being a purpose-built tool to help you drive consistency and standardization and maximize AWP for your organization in a programmatic fashion. So went through a lot there in a pretty quick process. Just key highlights that O3 is a platform. So O3 was designed from the very beginning to go across the entire project lifecycle from concept through commissioning. It's not a tool where we acquired a bunch of different softwares and then try to smash them together to make a platform solution. This was designed from the very beginning, understanding what right looked like, knowing what solved looked like from an engineering perspective. We could go in and say, okay, now we're going to architect a solution that has a consistent data architecture, a consistent user interface, and a consistent approach across this entire project lifecycle. And you see that in terms of the OnPlan for front-end planning, OnDesign for the detailed design, OnBuild for the construction execution, and OnStart for systems and completion. And then we've added on to that the digitization of your project and your project management through OnTarget, and then the change management of OnCourse, which allows you to drive the adoption of AWP, WorkFace Planning, and O3 on your projects as well as across the organization. We've extended that out into the field with our mobile components, both for foremen as well as the data collection around productivity and safety. And then as you grow and move from piloting AWP to programmatically rolling that out across your organization, you then grow into the O3 Enterprise Edition, which is purpose-built to help you drive that across your organization. So we went through a lot there in a short amount of time. I hope folks were able to keep up with a lot of that. At this point, I want to turn it back over to Mandy and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Great, thanks, Josh. We actually do have quite a few questions that have come in. A few that I've just answered directly in the chat window. I'll kind of give a highlight in case some of you had similar questions. Everyone that's attending today will receive a link to the final recording and a copy of the slides. So in a lot of cases, Josh was giving a pretty high overview of each of the solutions, and there was a lot of text on the screen. We weren't expecting you to be able to remember and memorize all of that, so you will get that information as a follow-up as part of your registration. We also received a couple of questions specifically around project references and particular company names and things like that. We are contractually obligated not to discuss that publicly. It's something, if you're familiar with the construction industry, something that's usually written into the contracts. We are happy to take that offline and follow up with you and give you some specific case studies that we have and use cases of the solutions to give you more details, just not something that we can discuss publicly. So hope you understand and support that as well. So a couple of questions, I'm getting them in both through the chat feature and through the publicly viewable Q&A. The first one I'll pitch over to you there, Josh, is would you describe the O3 solution suite as sitting over and interfacing with existing EPC IM systems such as cost, schedule, and procurement? So would you say that it sits over the top of those solutions?
That's a great question. So it depends on the implementation. So O3, when we think about just from a design philosophy perspective, we think about things as either being O3 tracks those things or O3 manages those things. And so tracking is where the execution happens in another system. We consume that data and then we report on that information and we provide some oversight functionality around that, or the ability to better analyze, or we connect that data with other data that we have inside the system. That's more of a tracking functionality. Then management is where that execution is actually occurring inside of O3 as a tool. So you're actually executing those transactions or executing those actions inside of O3. So when it comes to the project management functionality, that really, we have kind of both implementations there. So some of those would be instances where there are existing tools in place where we're consuming data from those and really are in more of a tracking capacity. And then there are others where, particularly when we're talking about smaller cap projects, where maybe some of the tools are less sophisticated, where O3 is being used as the primary execution tool. So the answer to that, whether O3 is doing tracking or managing of particular components, is a implementation specific question. I hope that addresses some of that.
Okay, a question I received in through chat was around our mobile solutions. Are the mobile solutions included in the platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. So from a technical perspective, they interface using our APIs. So O3 uses RESTful APIs, and all of data exchange between the iPad apps and our web app is done through those APIs. So from a technical perspective, they are part of the platform. From a commercial perspective, those do have a separate commercial agreement associated with them. So from a commercial perspective, they are distinct. From a technical perspective, again, it's part of that single platform intentionally built to have this consistent data architecture, consistent user experience.
Okay, and I see Sawyer over here. He's in our market education team. I think he's advocating on behalf of some of his clients that he's working with. I know he gets this question a lot. How does O3 get data into the platform, and is an integration required?
Yeah, great question. So there's a couple of different ways. Obviously, you can enter data into O3. You can use the tool, right? It has a user interface. So that's particularly when you're using O3 as the execution or management tool, that is certainly one way that you interface with that. But that's not the only data that O3 gets in. We obviously bring in data from other systems, and we do that. We also push data to other systems. That data exchange, whether that's being done via flat file like CSV, kind of Excel type file, or it's being done through a real-time integration, bidirectional, unidirectional integration between those systems, all that data flows through our RESTful APIs. So we've spent a lot of time architecting our solution to be very good at consuming data from other systems. That's really critical for what we're doing. We can do that via flat files, and those are then pulled in. They're translated appropriately and passed into O3. We have a configuration solution on our side to configure how we want to consume that data and bring it into the O3 data architecture, flows through the RESTful APIs. We also do bidirectional integrations for real-time integration using those RESTful APIs if the other system is sophisticated enough to support that. Regardless of whether we're doing a flat file or a real-time integration, we also have data management functionality around that. So O3, part of our client success process as we launch a project, we define the data management plan, and we do that actually inside of the tool. So we can configure what systems are being used and configure what data expectations there are from those systems, fields, format, and frequency that we expect to see that data. And then we've got reporting functionality to give feedback as to whether or not we're actually receiving that data, whether it's timely, whether it's complete, and in some cases, whether that data is accurate. So we've spent a lot of time working on the plumbing, if you will, to be able to get the data into the system, as well as the management functionality around that to understand what data we should be receiving and report on whether or not we are receiving that data. And that's allowed us to do implementations with 38 integration points in a matter of weeks. We're really quick at getting that kind of data into the system. We also have a set of kind of standard data specifications built on leveraging some of the CII work there as well, we provide with clients, and we say, hey, here's some standard data we expect and the format we expect that. So we've done a lot of work to make that as easy as possible.
Okay, Thank you for that. We do have a question about that the fact that O3, or we have someone attending that doesn't necessarily address industrial construction. So can you talk a little bit about how O3 can support more like data centers or manufacturing?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So, when I say focused on industrial construction, the reality is we're focused on people who are doing construction using, these methodologies of Agile or advanced work packaging. So if you are interested in leveraging advanced work packaging or Agile as a better process for your construction project, then O3 is built for you. So that includes data centers, manufacturing facilities, anywhere where you are using these methodologies to improve your construction process, then O3 is built for you. I say industrial construction just because that's an area where these methodologies have enjoyed significant penetration, but it's not limited to that. We really are focused on people who are interested in better process to improve their efficiency. We like to think that O3 is really valuable. The reality is the value comes from the process. O3 is just the best at getting you to drive and utilize that process, the best at making you realize that process and the associated benefits.
Okay, questions continue to come in. So on this one, what would you see as the benefits of O3 over solutions geared around primary design tools? And I'm not going to name other tools, but ones that are made specifically for design. So how does O3 kind of support that use case?
Sure. And I think I probably need to clarify there. So yeah, O3 is not a replacement for your primary design tool. And I apologize if I didn't make that clear. We are not a replacement for those primary design tools. What O3 is the tool for the work management throughout the life cycle of the entire project. So the physical process of designing can occur in another system, but managing the associated work, understanding how that connects to other work, how that impacts people downstream, what you need from other people upstream from you, that's what O3 manages, is that workflow and that execution across that entire project lifecycle. But the actual process for getting in with a computer-aided design tool, O3 is not a replacement for those.
Okay. Another one, you mentioned O3 is simple and user-friendly to create an IWP. Approximately how much time is required to create an IWP? And I know that's a loaded question because it has a lot to do with training, but if you could give an idea of, maybe manual versus doing it in a solution.
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, but I think, from what I understand, the estimates around manual are kind of in the 12-hour-ish time frame, and when you're using a tool, that cuts it down to 1 or 2 hours. So it's close to an order of magnitude gain in efficiency leveraging an automation tool. But I'm probably not the best to speak to that exactly.
Okay, yeah, that might be something we can take offline and talk to the implementation team and follow up with you. Last question, and then we'll need to wrap it up. We are getting close to time. You mentioned bringing the data in. Can you elaborate on accessing the data? Who has access?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I failed to mention this. Covered a lot of ground today, so I apologize. But one of the key things that allows O3 to be this collaborative environment across these different organizations is that we have a unique and very robust roles and permissions infrastructure. And part of that infrastructure is built on the actual contracting quilt. So what I mean by that is, so we have an example of a client that has thousands of users in the tool that go across multiple owners, EPC, and 50 or so contractors. And inside the tool, all of the work scopes are associated with a contracting quilt. We've actually imported that contract information into the tool, and then access to that information or data inside the application is restricted based off of your organization's contracts. So contractor A can't see contractor B's data unless they're both on that specific contract. And so that's a really important piece to allowing us to control that data and allowing us control access to that data and allowing us to be this modern collaborative platform. We have to be able to ensure that you can only access the information that you're contractually allowed to access, in addition to having, you know, a very robust roles and permissions infrastructure where you can, down to the very detailed level, you can understand this person's allowed to view constraints, but they can't, you know, they can't edit constraints, or they're not allowed to approve this, but they can view that. Or there's a very detailed, granular level of roles and permissions, in addition to this kind of unique component of the contract-based access control that O3 has built in.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we are getting close to time. We need to wrap up. So just wanted to invite you to learn more. If you like what you heard today, we have a lot more information. Josh had to go through everything pretty quickly, but we do have detailed information available on our website. We're also happy to share with you other webinars and case studies, as well as some videos that we have. We are on social media, on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, so Facebook. So if you are on any of those platforms, please join us there and be part of the conversation, and sign up for our monthly newsletter over on our website, www.o3.solutions. And please note, there is no .com. It really is just www.o3.solutions. We really thank you for the time that you've given us today. Josh, thanks so much for your time. I know you had a lot to cover in a short amount of time. If you have questions that we weren't able to cover today, or you want to get in touch with us to learn more, we invite you to do so. You can see our email and our website again there. Really appreciate, again, all of the time. We know your time is valuable. Hope that you have a great remainder of your day. Thanks so much again, Josh, and we will catch up with you soon.
Thank you.